I think that if we look at the 19th century and the real rise to economic preeminence of Britain, I mean, Britain had obviously established itself as perhaps the dominant naval power even in the 18th by the second third of the 18th century before the Industrial Revolution, but its economic preeminence comes with the Industrial Revolution. And if we say then, like, well, why did Britain industrialize before any other country in the world? I think that the answer is not only that it had significant or abundant domestic coal, but also because they've been using coal actually for a very long time for heating purposes, pretty much, again, unlike anywhere else, going back even the 12th century, certainly in by the 13th century, it had incentive to find ways of extracting deeper coal. The steam engine, the first purpose of the steam engine was to do precisely that, to be used in mining. And then the steam engine ran off coal, so you kind of like, it's a circular phenomenon. If you then look at the way in which British naval power developed in the 19th century, and you look at something that I think is pretty significant in world history, which is and I say world history very deliberately, is the first Opium War and the opening up of Imperial China. It's British steamships that now are able to be much more powerful than any sail-based navy could be. If you then look at the German story, Germany is advantaged like Britain by having coal, a lot of coal. But unlike Britain, it actually doesn't have iron deposits that are adjacent to the coal. Quite a lot of the iron deposits are in Alsace-Lorraine. France doesn't have coal. Even just saying that like that explains, I think, quite a lot as to why between 1870 and the creation of Germany through the Second World War, Alsace-Lorraine is a central part of the conflict between like France and Germany. It explains why the European coal and steel community, the first part of the European project, effectively was a means of giving France access to that West German coal. If we then bring oil into it, the thing that's really hard for every European power except for Austria, really, in the beginning of the 20th century, is they don't have any domestically. If you look at the beginning of the 20th century, the two large oil producers are the United States and Russia. I don't think it's a coincidence that they are going to go on, albeit in the case of Russia in the form of the Soviet Union, to dominate the 20th century geopolitically, to take over. The European imperial powers, by contrast, are going to be, eclipsed. Britain tries to deal with its oil problem, which it does sort of moderately successfully, by extending its empire around oil, i.e. sphere of influence in Persia, what was Mesopotamia, what will become Iraq in the post-First World War world. Germany loses desperately in that contest during the First World War. It ends up with nothing in the Middle East. It tries to take Baku, which is the basis of the now Soviet oil industry, and fails.
So Hitler's invasion of Russia has puzzled historians, but you suggest that it was at least partly about oil. Did I understand that correctly from your work?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not the first person who's made this argument. There are people who know a lot more about this than I do. But I think that if you understand that Germany was from its point of view, and I'm now talking about Weimar Germany, so after the First World War, in a really very difficult position because it had lost the war in the Middle East, is its bank, one of its most important banks, if not its most important bank, Deutsche Bank, which had effectively operated as its international oil company in the pre-1914 world, held 25% of the shares in what was then called the Turkish Petroleum Company, which had the concession for drilling in Mesopotamia. And as part of the peace, then Germany had to hand over, or Deutsche Bank had to hand over that ultimately to France. So the Germans begin in the Weimar period on a program of creating synthetic fuel, which is essentially to create an artificial version of oil from coal. Hitler expands that program. But there is no way that he can engage, the Nazis under Hitler can engage in war of conquest without much more oil supply than they actually have. And by the summer of 1941, it's pretty clear that the conquered territories that Nazi Germany has by that point, plus synthetic fuel is not sufficient. And Hitler was, I would say, apocalyptically obsessed with energy. He thought that the only way forward for Germany, if it was going to stay in the war, was to conquer Baku, which is in present day Azerbaijan, which was then the center of the Soviet oil industry.